Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles. I never expected my stepdaughter to see me as her real father. From the very beginning, I knew I was stepping into a complicated situation when I married my wife Denise. She had a daughter, Tiffany, from a previous relationship, and I was more than willing to love and support them both. I was ready for the usual growing pains of a blended family, the awkwardness, the slow trust building, the hesitation, but what I wasn't ready for was being treated like a walking ATM. From the moment Denise and I got serious, I made it clear that I wasn't just marrying her. I was committing to Tiffany, too. I wanted to be a father to her, to provide for her, to be there in every way that mattered, and I paid for her school, tuition. I took her to sports practice. I taught her how to drive. I saved up to help her with college. I was there for every recital, every game, every event. I did everything a father should do. Her biological father, on the other hand, was a ghost. Not a single birthday card, not a single call on Christmas, not a dime in child support. And yet, despite all of this, Tiffany idolized him. She spoke about him like he was some kind of hero, despite the fact that he hadn't lifted a finger for her. I told myself it was just a child's blind love for a parent, that maybe one day she'd see who truly cared for her. But as the years went by, things only got worse. She never missed an opportunity to remind me that I wasn't her real dad if I asked her to. Do chores, she would cross her arms, roll her eyes, and say, "You're not my dad. Don't tell me what to do." If I so much as suggested she clean her room or help with the dishes, I was met with a scoff, a dramatic sigh, and that same infuriating reminder when I tried to give her advice about school friends, or even something as simple as how to change a tire. She would shake her head and say, "I'll ask my real dad instead." Never mind that he wasn't around. Never mind that he had never shown up for a single event in her life. In her eyes, he could do no wrong, and I was just an inconvenient stand-in, someone to take care of the responsibilities he had abandoned. If I told her she couldn't do something, stay out late on a school night, go to a party I didn't approve of, or spend money recklessly, she'd storm off to Denise, tears brimming in her eyes, and Denise would immediately jump to her defense. "She's just being a teenager. Honey, don't take it personally," Denise would say, placing a hand on my arm like she was soothing a child she's still adjusting. She'd insist, as if Tiffany wasn't already deep into her teenage years and well past the point of adjusting. "It's just a phase," she'd reassure me, her voice soft and patient, as if I was the unreasonable one for expecting even the bare minimum of respect. But it wasn't a phase. Years passed. Tiffany never grew out of it, and Denise, she always had an excuse. No matter how many times I told her that I felt like a stranger in my own home, no matter how many times I pointed out that I was the one putting in the effort while her so-called real dad was nowhere to be found, she always had a reason to dismiss my feelings, a reason to justify Tiffany's behavior, a reason to tell me to just wait a little longer, to be more patient, to try a little harder. But how much more could I give before I had nothing left? One night I tried to have a serious conversation with Denise. I had bottled up my feelings for too long, hoping that things would change, but they never did. Tiffany still treated me like a stranger, and I was exhausted. I needed Denise to understand. I sat down beside her on the couch, rubbing my temples before speaking. "She treats me like I don't even exist, Denise. I've done everything for her, and she still refuses to acknowledge me as a father figure." My voice was calm, but there was a weight to it, years of frustration pressing against my chest. Denise sighed, her response predictable. "She doesn't mean it well. She's just struggling with identity issues." I frowned at that. Identity issues? Her real dad wasn't there for her, she said softly, and that left a wound. Those words stuck with me. Real dad? The phrase rattled around in my head like loose change in an empty pocket. I took a deep breath, studying myself. "I get that," I said slowly. "But I can't keep giving my all when I get nothing in return. It's exhausting, Denise. I feel like I'm pouring everything into a bottomless pit." Denise frowned, her hands twisting together in her lap. "She loves you," she said, though her voice lacked conviction in her own way. I studied her carefully. "Are you sure?" For the first time she hesitated. It was brief, just a flicker of uncertainty in her expression, but I caught it, and in that instant, a terrible thought hit me, one that I had never allowed myself to consider before. What if she married me, not because she loved me, but because she needed someone to provide for her and Tiffany? The thought churned in my gut long after our conversation ended. I tried to shake it off to tell myself I was overthinking, but the doubt had already taken root. And then just a few days later I heard something that made it impossible to ignore it happened on a random afternoon. I had come home from work early, the house unusually quiet, except for the faint sound of laughter coming from Tiffany's room. As I walked past her door, I paused, not to eavesdrop, but because I heard my name. Then came the words that made my stomach drop. "No, he's not my real dad. He's just a wallet." Silence, then a burst of giggles from one of her friends. "Damn girl," Tiffany continued, completely unaware that I was standing just outside her door. "I don't even know why he tries so hard. My real dad is so much cooler. Once I move out, I'm never talking to him again." Laughter, cold, cruel laughter. I felt physically sick. My hands clenched into fists. My jaw tightened, and for a brief moment, I considered barging in, demanding an explanation, demanding even the slightest bit of gratitude. But then, as the voices inside her room carried on as if nothing had happened, I realized something. What would be the point? I had spent years sacrificing, supporting, loving this girl, and to her I was nothing but a paycheck. I walked straight to the kitchen, my mind spinning, my chest tight with something between anger and exhaustion. Denise was at the sink washing dishes, completely unaware of that. Just a few steps away, my entire perception of my place in this family had just shattered. I didn't slam my hands on the counter. I didn't raise my voice. I just stood there, my tone eerily calm. I just heard Tiffany call me just a wallet to her friends. Denise turned around, startled. Her hands were still wet, droplets falling from her fingers onto the floor. What? No, she wouldn't. She did. For the first time in my life, I saw guilt flash across Denise's face. It was quick, barely more than a flicker, but it was there. She opened her mouth, probably to offer another justification, another excuse, another reason for me to swallow my feelings like I always did. But I was done. I took a step forward. I've taken care of her for years, Denise, and she's already planning to cut me off the moment she doesn't need me anymore. Denise looked away, that hesitation again, that same pause, the same unwillingness to meet me head-on. "She's just a kid," she muttered. I let out a short, humorless laugh. "You really think that's an excuse?" She didn't answer, and I don't know what was worse, the fact that Tiffany had said it, or the fact that Denise wasn't fighting back that silence. That was my answer. She knew, she had known all along, that Tiffany saw me as nothing more than a bank account, and instead of correcting it, instead of teaching her daughter to appreciate what she had let it happen. A sick feeling curled in my gut. Maybe Tiffany wasn't the only one who saw me as just a wallet, and the moment that thought entered my mind, it was like a floodgate opened suddenly. I started noticing all the little red flags I had ignored over the years. The way Denise had always encouraged me to pay for everything private. School, hobbies, trips, clothes without hesitation. The way every time I even suggested Tiffany get a part-time job, Denise would shut it down before I could finish my sentence. "She's too busy with school. She's still young. We don't need her to contribute." Whenever I tried to set financial boundaries, whenever I mentioned saving for the future, whenever I even hinted at the idea that Tiffany should learn responsibility, Denise would guilt-trip me. "Don't you love her? Don't you want her to have the best?" And Tiffany, the way she had never been disciplined for her ungratefulness, the way Denise always acted like things would get better, but never actually made an effort to change them. But the worst part, I didn't know if Denise would have ever married me if I wasn't financially stable. That thought made my chest tighten. Because what if I was just an investment? After that day, I stopped going out of my way for Tiffany. I wasn't cruel. I just stopped trying to win her over, no more, bending over, backward for a thankless role, no more, pretending that if I just loved her enough, she'd see me as more than a walking ATM. But Tiffany, she didn't even notice. She kept spending my money like it was infinite. The request started getting bigger, a larger allowance, a new car, because her old one, barely 3 years old, was apparently embarrassing. She started browsing expensive colleges, like tuition was just a number, completely unconcerned about cost. And when I suggested she apply for scholarships or, God forbid, get a part-time job, she actually laughed. Why would I do that? That's what you're for. The words came out so casually, so effortlessly, that for a second I thought I had misheard. But then I saw her smirk, completely oblivious to how deep her words cut. Denise was sitting beside her at the dinner table, poking at her food, and I waited for something. Anything, a scolding, a correction, even a look of disappointment. Instead, all she said was a tired sigh. Tiffany. Be nice, not Tiffany. That's unacceptable. Not Tiffany. Apologize. Just be nice. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just Tiffany's fault. Denise let this happen, and if I stayed quiet, it would never stop that night. After Tiffany had gone up to her room, I sat Denise down in the living room. The TV hummed softly in the background, casting flickering light across the room, but I ignored it. You need to stop enabling this, I said firmly. Denise frowned, rubbing her temples. Well, I told you she's just immature. I shook my head. No, she's entitled. There's a difference. Denise sighed. What do you want me to do? She's a teenager. She's figuring herself out. I let out a slow breath, keeping my voice even. No, she's already figured it out. She knows exactly what she's doing. Denise spit her lip. You're making too big of a deal out of this. I clenched my jaw. Am I then tell me this, if I lost my job tomorrow and couldn't provide for you, and Tiffany, would you still be here? Silence, a long, heavy, guilt-ridden silence. She opened her mouth, then closed it. And in that moment I knew she couldn't even lie to me. That was all the answer I needed. I wasn't going to fight. I wasn't going to argue. I was simply going to give them exactly what they wanted. Tiffany thought I was just a wallet? Fine. The wallet was closed. At first, she didn't even notice. She still went out with her friends like nothing had changed. She still swiped the credit card I had given her. Still acted like she had all the power. Then one afternoon, the first crack appeared. I was sitting on the couch working on my laptop when she stormed into the living room, face red with fury. Well, my card got declined. Fix it. I didn't even look up. No. She blinked. What? I finally turned to her, calm. As ever, I canceled it. She stared at me, processing. Then it hit the realization, the anger. Then she lost it. You can't do that. That's my money. I raised an eyebrow. Your money? You know what I mean? She threw up her hands. God, you're so selfish. You're ruining my life. Denise ran into the room, alarm flashing across her face. What's going on? Tiffany spun around, jabbing a furious finger in my direction. He canceled my card. Denise's eyes widened as she turned to me. Confused. Will, why would you do that? I met her gaze without blinking. Because Tiffany made it clear I'm just a wallet. So I decided to act like one, and wallets don't open themselves. Silence. Denise shifted uncomfortably, her hands clasped together as if she wanted to say something, but couldn't find the words. Tiffany, on the other hand, clenched her fists. I don't need you. She spat, her voice dripping with defiance. My real dad will help me. I smirked. Good, call him. I didn't say another word after that. There was nothing left to say. For the next few days, Tiffany shredded around the house like nothing had changed. She held her head high, brushing off my decision as if it were nothing more than a minor inconvenience. She told her friends it was just a misunderstanding, that I'd come to my senses soon enough. But most of all, she was certain, so damn certain, that her biological father would step up. Then came the phone call. I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard her voice from the other room. Dad, I need help with rent. A pause, then, clear as day, his lazy, dismissive voice. Carried through the phone rent kid. I barely got money for myself. I didn't have to see her face to know she had just stiffened. Wait, what? Her voice cracked slightly. You heard me. Her hands shook, but she pressed on. But you said you'd always be there for me. And then he laughed, a slow, humorless chuckle that was colder than anything I could have ever said to her. I was just saying that you didn't actually believe it, did you? Tiffany turned pale. You don't mean that there was a tired sigh on the other end of the line. Listen, kid, I don't got time for this ask your stepdad. That's his job, ain't it? And just like that, he hung up. Tiffany sat there staring at her phone like it had just betrayed her. Her biological dad had abandoned her. Her credit card was gone. Her friends, the ones who used to love shopping and dining out with her, had stopped answering her texts. Her perfect little bubble had burst. I walked past the kitchen, pausing just long enough to glance at her. She was still gripping the phone, her eyes wide with shock, and for the first time in her entire life, she had no one left to save her. Tiffany had spent years living in a fantasy, a carefully crafted illusion where she could treat me like garbage, and still get everything she wanted in her mind. I was nothing more than an ATM, a source of endless funds, while her biological father was her safety net, waiting in the wings to catch her if things ever went south, and Denise was her shield always, ready to smooth things over, to make excuses to defend her, no matter what. But now that fantasy was crumbling. Tiffany sat at the kitchen table, gripping her phone so tightly she didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at the screen as if willing it to ring again, as if hoping her father would call back and say it was all a joke, that, of course, he would help her. The call never came. She sat frozen for what felt like forever before. Without a word, she stood up and stormed off to her room. I expected another tantrum, another outburst, another round of screaming about how unfair I was. But for the first time there was nothing, just silence. Denise, who had been standing near the doorway, the whole time, looked shaken. Her arms were wrapped around herself, like she was cold. Though the house was warm that night, we sat on opposite sides of the bed, the space between us feeling wider than ever. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Finally, Denise sighed, her voice barely above a whisper. I never thought he'd really turn his back on her like that. I turned to look at her, really, because I did. She didn't argue. She just rubbed her temples, looking utterly exhausted. I thought I was protecting her, she admitted. I thought if I kept the peace, things would eventually get better. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. No, Denise, you weren't protecting her, you were enabling her. She flinched at that, and for a second I thought she might snap back, might defend herself the way she always had, but instead, she just exhaled, long and slow. She had a choice. I continued. She could have had a father who actually cared about her, a man who never left, who paid for everything, who showed up. But she chose to spit on. That Denise's voice was barely above, a whisper now, because I let her. I didn't say anything, because she was right. Denise had spent years excusing Tiffany's behavior. She had defended her, shielded her, softened every consequence. And now her daughter was completely alone. And this time, Denise couldn't fix it. Tears welled up in Denise's eyes as she stared at the wall, her expression a mixture of guilt and regret. I should have stopped her, she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. I exhaled slowly, running a hand through my hair.
Yeah, you should have.
Denise wiped her face, sniffling, and finally looked at me. Her gaze wasn't defensive this time, it wasn't pleading, it was resigned. You were right to cut her off, she admitted for the first time in our entire marriage. Denise finally saw it. She saw Tiffany for who she was, for what she had become, and for the first time she wasn't standing in the way. Over the next few weeks, Tiffany spiraled. It started with an eviction warning from her landlord. She begged her friends for money, but they ghosted her one by one, suddenly too busy to return her calls, the job she had quit so smugly before they didn't want her back. She was broke, abandoned, completely out of options, and then finally, she cracked. I was in my office going over some paperwork when I heard a soft knock at the door. I already knew who it was. I took my time setting down my pen before standing up and pulling the door open. Tiffany stood there looking like a shadow of the girl she once was. Her face was pale, her eyes red and swollen from crying. Her posture was different. Small defeated reality had finally broken her. She swallowed hard, shifting on her feet. "Can we talk?" I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. Talk about what? She hesitated, gripping the sleeves of her hoodie, like they could somehow hold her together when she finally spoke. Her voice was soft, shaking, almost childlike. "I'm sorry." The words hung between us, unfamiliar and fragile. She took a deep breath, as if forcing herself to keep going. "I didn't mean what I said before. I was stupid. I was selfish. I took you for granted." I stayed silent, watching her. She licked her lips, her voice cracking. "You were always there for me. You showed up, you paid for everything. You treated me like a real dad." Her eyes filled with fresh tears, and she looked down ashamed. "And I treated you like nothing." Her shoulders trembled as she whispered, "I was wrong, and now I don't know what to do." "Oh," then finally she lifted her gaze to mine, desperation shining through her eyes. "Please, I need help." I took a long breath, staring at her for the first time in years. Tiffany was truly vulnerable. No fake bravado, no entitlement, just pure, raw desperation. But me, I wasn't desperate. I had already moved on. I sighed, leaning against the doorframe. "Tiffany, do you know what a wallet does when it's empty?" She blinked, confused. But I took a slow, deliberate breath. It closes, and with that, I shut the door. In her face, for a few seconds, I stood there listening, waiting. But there was no outburst this time, no screaming, no pounding on the door, just silence. Then the sound of footsteps retreating. I walked back to my office, sat down and picked up my pen. Like nothing had happened. Later that night, my phone rang. Tiffany. I let it go to voicemail. She called again and again. I never picked up, and eventually she stopped calling. At least not from her number. A week later, Denise's phone rang. While we were having dinner, I was cutting into my steak when I heard it buzz on the table. Denise glanced at the screen, her expression tightening. "It's Tiffany. I kept eating. You going to answer?" Denise hesitated, her fingers hovering over the phone then. For the first time in her life, she let it ring. We ate in silence, the unanswered call lingering in the air, like the final note of a song, and that was when I knew Denise had finally let go. A few days later, I was in my office when a new email popped up in my inbox from Tiffany. Subject: "I know you probably won't read this." I stared at it for a moment before clicking. "I miss you. I was stupid. I see that now. I lost everything, and it's all my fault. I don't know what to do. Please, just talk." To me, the words felt hollow, like she was grasping at something that had long since slipped through her fingers. I read it once then. Without hesitation, I deleted it. No response, no closure, nothing. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't anger, it isn't fighting, it's simply moving on. What happened to Tiffany? After that, she lost her apartment. She had to move into a tiny shared rental with two strangers who barely tolerated her. She got a minimum wage job and finally understood what it felt like to have nothing. And me, I still had my home. I still had my career. I still had my wife. And the best part, I never had to hear my ex-daughter's voice again. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe